Hello everyone, welcome to episode 7 of our Composite Surf Kayak build. This is a carbon fibre reinforced composite boat that we've been building over the last few episodes, and in this issue I'm going to join the hull and the deck. It's a little bit of a tricky endeavour, but there's a lot of information in this one, and hopefully it'll help you along with your projects. Thanks for joining me, and don't forget to like it and don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. Okay, so I've just been outside. I took these guys out, took the deck out, and I took the hull out, and I'm just sanded nice and smooth around the edges to make sure I'm going to get a good mating surface with which to join these hull and deck together. Now, I've set up these flat stands here. I usually use my kayak racks that you've seen on the previous episodes and the previous shows, how I've actually used those. They cradle the boat. The difference is with this particular model is that it has a flat hull, and so I need flat stand like this that are basically dead level. So I've spirit leveled these up, and I get them level, because what I don't want to do is join a deck to a hull and have a twist in the hull, because that twisting hull will create a boat that won't track straight. Now, because it's a planing hull kayak, it's unlikely to track straight anyway. Generally, it maintains its speed and its stability by being up on a plane and right on the water surface rather than in it. So I'm going to get the hull and I'm going to position it, and then I'm going to sit this on top. There's a couple of things I need to show you before I do that. Okay, so here's the hull that we made earlier. And you'll notice that I've sanded all the areas where the peel ply is on this hull. And the reason why I've done that is that studies have shown that if you sand a peel plied area very lightly, and you have to give it a little swish with some 60 grit sandpaper, that you will increase the hold and the mechanical bond tenfold. I always make it a bit of a policy, even though I've been told I don't need to do it, and Composites guys will say you don't need to do it. There actually has been quite a lot of research done on this to make sure that all that peel ply, all those tiny little teeth, are going to engage with the resin and the cloth that you're going to impart onto it. By giving it a light sand, once again you're starting to rough it up a little more, giving it a little bit more surface area to bite on. You don't want to use smooth sandpaper though. You want to use something that's 60 to 80 or 100 grit, something that's a bit coarse, that'll scuff it up and give you all that mechanical bond that we're aiming for into the future. Now, if I were just to sit this deck on top of that hull, it's going to go and it's not going to sit level on the hull where I want it to sit. So I've got a couple of little items that I use, and I use some thin pieces of sheet metal. That there. And then I have another piece of thin steel which I can slide forward. Now this needs to be reasonably wide. To sit my deck. Loosely in place without actually losing it. That all has to be tied together somehow, and the way that I do that is this. So the first thing I'll do is I'll align it roughly. I'll get it essentially lengthwise reasonably right as to where it needs to be. You can see there I've still got too much overhang, so I need to bring that slightly forward. And because this came out of the mould, I know that it fits perfectly together. And you can take some what we call 100 mile an hour tape here. I'm not sure whether you would be familiar with that in the Northern Hemispheres, but we call this 100 mile an hour tape because it'll hold a lump of lumber on a roof rack of a truck or a tradies pickup at 100 miles an hour. This is one of the best tie downs you can carry as a tradie when you're picking up lumber and the like at your timber yard. But yeah, so what I'll do is I'll just take a piece of that and just loosely align the bow. I'm going to start at the rear. I use masking tape and I tape this boat together one piece at a time, working from side to side, ensuring that that boat is straight and square the entire process. Now the other advantage of putting tape all the way around the outside, I see a lot of guys that use blocks of wood, they'll glue it, is that when I tip this boat on its side to accept its inside seam, it has a pool to catch all the resin, and in fact any gap or any little break in the deck and the hull seam will be filled by resin, and then it'll be internally seamed and then externally seamed therefore encasing it like a sandwich. So the trick is to just go for a rough fit and then go for a perfect fit. Alright, and that's around about enough. You got to remember I've got pieces of metal under here. All these things are going to be affecting the shape of this boat. But for now, that's giving me a really sort of reasonable shape to start with. Now I have a similar issue at the back here. It's pretty flexible. I need to join this to the hull and the deck and make sure that it's as square as I can get it. The problem is I've taped up the front, so I use this paint stripper this paint slicer I've got, and put it together so that I can get it about as close as I can get it. Now I may need to go and relieve it up at that end, but for the most part that's now in the correct position. And what I need to do as I work along is tease it into shape. And then I'll move a little bit further around. Put a couple of tabs in. It's just like welding, you've got to tack it in place. You've got it where you really want it. Now, I'm not happy with that. I've got the deck forward of the hull here and the hull forward of the deck here. So that's where this comes in. This is a very useful little tool for bringing this all together. And now we're in business. Now I've got it in position where I want it. I can quickly run along. You'll notice I'm doing a slight overlap of the masking tape. Masking tape is very weak, but when you put 500 pieces together, it's strong enough for the job that I have. And you're probably thinking there's got to be a quicker way. Yeah, there is, but not if you want it to be perfect. And that there, hull and deck join, is absolutely spot on. Now I'm at a point where I can remove this guy, because this is actually in a really bad position for me now because I can't go forward, so I'm going to pull this out. So now that I've got a good starter, I can relieve the nose, and now I'm going to work slowly up each side, ensuring that my seam edge is perfect. So a little bit there, again, a bit like tack welding. And I'm applying a fair downward pressure on this as I tie it together. I'm just going to zoom in here. You can see I'm actually at the midpoint of the boat, or a little bit forward, but I've got a perfect seam all the way around here. And by doing this taping method, I'm also creating a dam. Once I tip this boat on its side, all the resin's going to pool down in that section there. But that is absolutely spot on. Very important that you do each side concurrently. So you'll do this side and then go straight over the other side and do a foot on each side. You don't want to initiate a twist into these holes as you work your way forward. But yeah, the process is pretty laborious. It takes me a good hour to put the outside tape on this, but it also ensures that I'm getting that, you know, that really true shape of the boat. And often sea kayaks are a little bit easier because they're typically a rounded top with a rounded hull. The whole shape is not really conducive to good joining, so that's why we're taking our time putting this guy together. Okay, so I've joined the hull and the deck together very carefully to make sure I get a good shape, and I've now suspended it from these tie-down straps I have hanging from the roof so that I can actually do the seam one side at a time. Now, in a lot of circumstances, you can actually physically join a boat in its mould. If you've got a hull and a deck mould, you can actually physically put it back in the mould, wing nut it together, lay it on its side, and do this seam, particularly on longer sea kayaks. And I have actually done that in the past. I still will always prefer the taping method. I have joined some in the mold where one sort of slipped in a little bit. Sometimes it's not an ideal fit. So for this, I know that this is perfect now. I've cut my two internal seams, and these are a 50mm Dynel fiberglass mix. Now Dynel is actually it's actually often termed as poor man's Kevlar, because it's a little bit stronger than fiberglass, but not quite as strong as Kevlar and not quite as impact resistant. But this stuff is fantastic. If you can get this, I used to buy this off Malcolm in Europe, so I'm going to have to be in contact with him because I'm running out of this stuff. But one of the best internal seaming tapes I can buy. Now you can buy carbon tapes and Kevlar tapes for this purpose as well. Now how I start to internally seam this is I give this a very good wipe out with some methylated spirits or some styrene, and a styrene wipe will clean it and sort of attempt to reactivate it a little bit like acetone will. I don't like using acetone on raw fiberglass because it does tend to dissolve the substrate a little bit, so you've got to be a little bit careful using acetone around any of your pre-manufactured parts, because it will have the effect of dissolving it. So you can see I've actually formed a U channel there, and putting it in place can be a little bit of a challenge inside the boat here, but I like to put it in dry. Others would put it in wet and then use a stick to poke it in place. I find I have much better success if I put it in dry. You can see here, this here is my internal seam. It mates perfectly because I've ensured that I've done it. And you see that beautiful black carbon there, and also I've cleaned that there, and that's been peel plied, and obviously it's still a little bit wet from the styrene that I put in there, but that's flashing off and it stinks too. But I'm now going to lay this cloth, and you can see here in the fin box here where I've allowed for space there to seam this boat. I'm going to lay this cloth all the way up into the back of the boat. Just using my arm. I almost have to take my hat off to do this. As you can see, I've got the seam pretty much in place there. It gets a bit hard to see as we go back into the depths of the back of the boat there. But it's up, and it's more than about 5 centimeters or 2 inches across the center line of the boat. What I'm going to do is have the other ones going to be then 5 centimeters, and that'll give me a really strong section right at the very rear. You can see there it's pretty much equidistant across that seam line there, and it comes down and stops around about at the hip area. And the reason why it stops there is because there's a seat here, and I'm going to be able to avoid having that seen behind the seat. I always think about those sorts of cosmetics when I'm making a boat. Now the stern tape that I've put in there, unfortunately, is the easy one. The more difficult one by far is the bow. The bow is around about 4.5 feet long. My arms are only about 2.5 to 3 feet long. So I'm working on the same sort of principle. If I get this sort of U shape, I fold it in half and sort of stretch it and massage it into shape here. By getting it roughly to the shape of the seam, it'll sit down a lot easier, like so. And then I'm going to take this piece of metal here. Now I've had this piece of metal, it's actually from a garage, a roller door, like a B&D roller door. And you'll notice it's actually got a bend in the top of it. And the reason why it's got a bend in it is because I'm going to catch this on the end of this, and then I'm going to lay this around it, and I'm going to feed it up into the bow of the boat and hopefully not pull it back when I slide it in there. If you ever buy a kayak, or you ever pick up a kayak and it hasn't been seamed all the way to the nose, take it back to the manufacturer and ask them to do it for you. It's not good enough. It takes a lot of effort to get the seaming right, and it's one of those things I pride myself on doing, is making sure that it's right into the bow as far as possible. I then, once they're seamed on both sides, I then stand the boat on its nose and pour a solid filled resin end pour into it as well. That is one of the features of all the boats that I build, and a couple of the manufacturers I've worked with over the years, Seaward Kayaks in Canada, Mega Kayaks, and Synergy Paddle Sports Kayaks, the ones that I build here, and all of our Viking designs. We actually make sure that all our boats are end poured on both ends, particularly on sea kayaks. not so much on a surf kayak, more on the nose of the surf kayak, and we're going to run through that a bit later on. That seam is now in place, ready to be resined in, and it's a very simple process. It's a brush on a stick, and it's that easy. Now I've got a couple of specialised tools I use for this job. For the stuff that I can reach, just a standard 50mm 2-inch brush. It's that simple. That's all you're going to need. But for the bit up in the nose, you need a long piece of plastic conduit and a brush on the end, but note the slight bend in the brush. What I do is I put this part in the vise and I heat the handle until I can get that slight bend. And it's so important I have that slight bend to be able to run this right up into the bow of the boat. And without this, I would not simply be able to ever seam that. So it's quite a simple solution. And this brush here is only used for this purpose. It never gets used for anything else. I basically clean it, I have it ready to fire, and it's simple. And yeah, that's basically it. That's the only tools you need to seam the inside of a boat correctly. You can, and look, it'd be nice to be able to consolidate it with a roller up in there, but you can't. You simply can't reach it. So you've got to work with what you've got. It's great on sea kayaks, so there's a hatch here. Often I've got long enough arms, I can actually reach right into the bow. But on a surf kayak like this, I mean, I'm doing best to be able to reach to about here. So you need to be able to get in there somehow, and it's that simple. It's not rocket science, it's pretty basic stuff. Okay, what I'll do is I'll start by putting some resin on the tape down in the midsection of the boat, and that stops it from sliding inside the boat. And what I'll often do is I'll pour a small amount. And by pouring it, I've actually got better control. I'm not going to end up with blobs of resin all over the inside of the boat. And then I'll just simply brush it out. Now, because gravity is working here, it's holding the resin where I really want it to be. I don't want it up the side of the boat, but I also don't want it to be moving around too much, and I certainly don't want it pooling. So you've got to be pretty sparing. You don't want a lot of resin in here. You just want enough to really effectively wet out this beautiful cloth that we've got here. And you can see right here I've actually got a double of the cloth. So I've got it where it's joined. It's a bit hard to do one piece, so there's a double up there. Now I'm going to finish that with peel ply later on once I'm done working on this seam. So now I've got that sitting nice and happily there without moving around. I can start working on the outer extremities of the boat. How I do that is I'll pour some further up in the boat. Let it run down, let your gravity do the work, and then I'll be working the resin into the seam with the brush, nice and slowly. Okay, once I've done that, I'll then pour some up into the front there and get my other brush and work it right up into the bow. Now the advantage of working slowly is that I'm not forcing that cloth into place. I'm actually working it in and consolidating it as I roll it or as I brush it. The last thing you want to do is displace it now while it's wet, because then it's going to be difficult, or very, very difficult, to get back into shape or into place while it's wet. And then to finish it off, simply a piece of peel ply over that join, and that'll ensure there's no sharp edges for the guy to catch his arm or leg on as he runs his hands through the boat or if he's cleaning it out. A small amount of peel ply right here over the seam will ensure that we end up with a nice smooth finish where we had that overlapping seam. And the nice thing is that that's actually going to be hidden behind the seat, where hopefully he'll never see it. But if he ever runs his hand up inside there to clean it with a sponge, clean out any sand or debris or something that might get under his seat, I'm guaranteeing here that he's not going to catch his hand and cut himself on that area as well. So little techniques, little hints and tips that make a big difference to the end product. And that's now it for the day. It's late in the afternoon. I'm going to leave that overnight, come back in the morning, flip it over, do the other side. Tomorrow afternoon, we're putting the seam on this boat and finishing it on the day after. So it might look like I've only got one project going on here at the moment, but I'm sort of making room for this boat at the moment because I have a lot going on in here. I've got a factory probably about 4 or 5 times the size of this shop here, where we store kayaks and we sell kayaks, and I've got some of the parts of the catamaran and stuff in here. But the thing is that I like to have a clean environment, lots of room to move, and I've got 5 or 6 jobs going on here. I've got blackwater tanks, I've got, you name it, I've got bits and pieces of everything going on here right now. But at the moment, what's occupying a lot of my space here is this kayak, because I like to have a lot of room to move around. And when you're setting up a shop, a workshop of any description, make sure you got plenty of room to function, because if you don't, you spend more time cleaning, moving stuff around than you do actually working, and that is very counterproductive. I've now taken the kayak down, and as you can see, it's joined. It was early this morning and my seams have gone off, so I can now have a bit of a touch in here, make sure everything is gone off. Yes, it's all nice and catalysed, and I can now start to remove the tape that's around the outside. It takes me a little bit of time, but because I only put this on yesterday, it comes off really easily. And because I've twiddled all of my masking tape, I can just gather it quite quickly and remove it. 10 minutes, job's done. And this might be a time sort of consuming task, taping it together like this, but I have never had one fail or get to this stage where the hull and the deck have separated, and that would not be a good scene, because you've got to virtually cut it open and start again. So I've just been around the perimeter of this boat, making sure I get most of the residue off. The next thing I need to do is to mask this surface and leave a 25mm external seam and sand it up, and then I'm going to put a glass fibre tape along here, and it's a very, very nice little braid that I use, and that's what's coming up on the next issue. So I hope you enjoyed that, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share it out, and make a comment. And if you liked it, great, please like it. If you didn't like it, let me know why. Make a comment, and hopefully we can have a chat about some techniques, and I'll see you next time on the Composite Shop.